Welcome back to Outdoors with the Morgans. It is first thing in the morning, and we are going on a educational field trip today. We're not far from the Pittsburgh International Airport, and I wasn't sure where I was, but I just realized years ago I did a bunch of blasting in this area. It's kind of a interesting area around here. It seems real busy. You know, there's highways, there's traffic, and then in 2 minutes you go from in it pretty deep to out of it. Like, this is pretty nice country right here. Now, a lot of this area, a lot of old strip mine area. I mean a lot, all around the Pittsburgh airport. There's a lot of good coal in this area, the Pittsburgh seam. And I worked on and off down this way for years on highways, all around the airport, just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're gonna go visit a big logging job. I think this is like 300 or 400 acres. It's huge. Pete from YouTube, Nuts319, is doing this job, and we're gonna learn a lot today about the value of logs, what to look for, all kind of stuff. You know, the more
in half a mile,
you think you have things figured out, the more you begin to realize how much more you need to learn. This area, like I said, was heavy in coal, and nowadays it's more oil and gas. Matter of fact, I'm on a lease road to a gas well right now. But according to Pete, I follow this out for a ways, and I should end up at the landing area. And I think I wanted to turn left back here. Bunch of farmland mixed in with all the well pads. I'm getting close. I think that's Pete's dozer. All right, so I found it, Pete, and I was exactly on time.
Yeah.
I said coming in here, this area is so, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere, but you're not that far from the airport.
No.
What, half hour from Pittsburgh right here, maybe?
Yeah, half hour. Yeah.
So how big is this site?
I think the total site's 400 some acres. Don't hold me to that.
And you're going to be here a while.
Yeah, this is the biggest job I've ever been on in my life. One particular job. I think total sale was close to 750,000 feet of material. And it's done by a consultant forester. It's a management cut, select cut kind of deal. So.
And this was old strip ground here?
Parts were stripped.
Up on the tops?
Yes, and then parts haven't ever been touched. There was an old, the field with the shirts in it when you came in.
Yeah.
That was a landing. It was an old airstrip at one time. And then it was a working farm, and it still is now. I mean, the farmers don't live here. It's leased by another neighbor, so.
So I get tons of questions from people. Well, one is how to identify different species of trees, but what different logs are worth, like what makes a good log, what, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And the one thing that we need to talk about, I live 45 minutes from here, but like our red oak where I live is different than the red oak here.
Yes, it's all about soils. So, and there'll be different types of red oak. Like the red oak you're familiar with is growing over here where it's not strip ground. What I'm working in now has overburden, you know, in it. So it's growing really fast, and I'll show examples of it. The bark tends to look a little different, but it's still, you know, great wood. It's just tends to have a little more defect in it.
More mineral streaks.
Yes.
And
yes.
things like that. So what are we looking at here, Pete?
So I have an example of a bunch of different logs here. Some would be possible veneer logs, some would be stave logs, because
what's a stave log?
Okay, so stave log is only white oak. That goes to make barrel staves. They typically like the nicer grade logs. And what they'll do with this log is when it goes to the mill, I can't speak for all stave mills, but for some of the ones we deal with, typically what they do is they quarter this log. So the sawyer, it'll go in, they'll usually chop at the length first. So it'll be whatever lengths they need. It's usually right around 3 or 4 foot, I believe. And then they'll split this log into quarters perfectly like this. Now, the sawyer will determine, hey, if I split it this way, I can kind of exclude that crack, you know, to get the best yield out of it. But there's a defect in that end I'll show you that'll play a bigger role in that. But they'll split it into quarters, and then those quarters go through a resaw. Each time they go through the resaw, they would, you know, if it's split this way, they take a board here, then a board here, a board here, a board here, a board here, a board here.
So they're true quarter sawing it.
Yes, all the way through, because it's something with the barrel making process. It has to be quarter sawn for it to work right. I've researched it, listened to it. I don't remember it all, so I don't want to talk about it too much and someone call me out on it. But that's just, I know that's how they do that. So this log, to look at it, is a gorgeous butt log. Someone would think, hey, that's probably a veneer log. You walk around the back side of the tree and I can show you. There's a dead limb, and then, you know, included knot. And this limb, as you can see,
oh yeah,
it was coming from down in here somewhere.
Yep.
So you figure if it's here, that limb's you're gonna have that defect go clean into the log about there. Now, takes you right out of the veneer market immediately. And I'll go further into that in a minute, but to look at it, for a stave buyer would buy this, and he would like this, because if he quarters this log just right, slices it there and there, you can put that in the 1/4. You'll still get usable material out of that quarter. There will be some waste, but then you still save 3/4 of the rest of the tree.
Right.
So that's what would make that for your stave. Now, a veneer log, this is a hard maple, which I'm not sure if they're going to buy veneer with as warm as it is right now. And then, but it's close. This is just from cutting. It starts to stain a little bit already. So this stuff, hard maple is very susceptible to warm weather. It'll spoil very, very fast. You just think of it like fruits or vegetables or meat. The colder, it's going to last longer. But the first thing you look for is this down here is your butt swell. So you can't factor that too much into this, but you try to get a centered heart. First, like this is a cherry, which now looking at it's got some gum in it, so it won't make a veneer, but it has a centered heart. You want that center heart. That's the first thing they want. Second thing they want is even growth rings. So I don't know if we can really see it on these. I'll try to find a log that we can see it on, but obviously you want straight. Everybody thinks they got to be giant for a veneer log. They don't have to be giant. Actually, I know they prefer like that 18 to 20 inch stuff, 16 to 20 inch stuff.
So veneer is basically a centered heart.
Yes.
Straight as an arrow.
They will take some sweep in them sometimes, depending on the type of veneer. There's two. There's rotary, you know, rotary peeled veneer, and there's vertical slice veneer, where they actually split the log and it's grabbed and it's sliced like you would be cutting a bunch of sheets, like boards off of it, but it's sliced off.
Okay.
So if you come up here on this end, there's centered heart, even growth rings, and the big thing with hard maple is, here's your heartwood, is very small.
Yeah, where soft maple is huge.
Well, sometimes you'll get small in soft maple too. And now our hard maple, I got some in that pile, I'll go show examples of this later, that the hearts get bigger, and it doesn't necessarily make it a bad grade log, but your money is in that whiter wood, the light wood. And then lastly, you want to look at that log, you know, you want it as straight as you can get it, and you don't want any imperfections. So right here, a veneer buyer is going to go, there was a limb right there at one time, possibly. And then he'll see this bump and he'll be like, well, there was something going on right there. Now, the market dictates how much of that they'll let slide when they buy a log. From what I understand, hard maple's pretty sought after, or was here just recently. So, and if it won't veneer, then it's no worries. If you have the market, now they make baseball bats out of these, because ash is a thing of the past in our area. But a baseball bat company will come, they'll love that log because it's clean, small heart. They chop it into shorter lengths of baseball bats, and they core, you know, bat blanks out of it and go from there.
Yeah.
Same thing here. We have another hard maple, small heart, possible veneer, probably not. I got that.
Yeah, a little bump on her
there.
Yeah,
they'll call that, if it's hidden under the bark, they'll call it a cat face. Like this would be a cat face. This is just an actual protruding a little bit there, you can see.
Yep.
So
how many like different grades of like a white oak would you sell? Like what would be the worst to the best? I know veneer would be the best. Where do you start at? Like what's marketable?
So typically, now I'm going to explain this in what I've gone through in the past. Someone might come on here and say, well, that's not what it is now, or that's not what this mill does. And I'm not going to argue with that, because it's very geographically, depending on how people buy stuff and how log graders grade mills and all that, but anyhow, white oak right now, you will have your veneer logs, you'll have your stave logs, and then you'll have usually a stave log could be anything from 3 clear sides to all the way up to a veneer log. But why would you sell a veneer log as a stave log if you can sell it for more as a veneer? So once again, it all depends on the market you have in your area. Now, when you visualize a log, when I say sided log, 3-sided, 2-sided, 1-sided, you think of that log as a square, okay? And visualize it as a square in the middle. How many sides of that log are clean and free of defect? So since this white oak we looked earlier had that limb up there on that side, this is now a 3-sided clean log. There's 3 good sides to it. All right, so that would put you in a different bracket. But there are 3-sided logs that go to stave, but a 3-sided log that goes to grade lumber sawing is going to be a different price, typically less than stave. And then once you get past like 2 clear sides, depending on the value of the species, it's just better to push it into blocking. Now, what is blocking is a industrial grade material, industrial products, you know, shipping, pallets, timbers for like cribbing or any industrial use material. So that's where when you see the loader in the different piles, there's different sorts of things. Now, if I was selling this, my sorts would be even more strict, but since I'm cutting for a sawmill, they kind of do a lot of that.
They'll sort and...
Yeah, I got to get it basically blocking and scrag, that's an industrial grade lumber. We just call it that because of how it's sawn and it's longer. And then you have your grade logs. And then they kind of go through and determine what they want to try to resell, what they want to saw. But, so things to look for. So right now, cherry's not worth a whole lot.
Yeah, cherry fell out of favor big time.
Yes, and it will come back around. Definitely in my career, it will. It went out in my career and it'll come back in my career. When I first started cutting cherry, it was like, nice. You know, the early 2000s was when it was the hottest, and right around 2008 there was a big crash and everything went under for a while. So, but one of the things you want to look for in cherry as a defect, you can have the cleanest log, straightest log, but it'll have what they call gum in it. And you see these little black streaks? Yeah. It's like a sap, I think, or like a resin in the tree.
And that one's not that bad.
No, but if it has gum, that takes you out of the veneer market completely right there. So this log here is a 12-foot log. It's got a little bit of, it sweeps one way and then sweeps back the other way. But since it's a lower grade, for cherry we'll have grade logs, but they can almost be just as valuable sawn into railroad ties as they can to be lumber. So it's kind of, you're not cutting necessarily for grade, you're cutting for the finished product you can get out of that log. So say, you know, the mill might make more money cutting 16-foot timbers for bridge mats. Well, you might have this perfectly clean cherry log. You cut it 16-footer and make a timber mat out of it. Even though in your brain it's like, that doesn't seem right, it's such beautiful lumber. But on the business aspect end of it, you have to do that because that's where you make your money at.
Right.
So that log there, they'll probably set that aside and hope maybe an exporter will try to buy it. Because there is a small market for it. It's just got to be really good stuff. Like I said, what you can get away with, what people are willing to pay and what people are willing to accept, there's a reasonable amount of defect, or as I say, strike against the log, is all in the market for it. Right now, you have your hard maples, soft maples, walnut, and white oak seem to be the best things going. So you can get away. Walnut, it all goes for resale, what we cut. I don't think we saw any walnut. And it doesn't matter if it's got 0 knots and it's a veneer log, or if it's got 30 knots and it's 8 foot and crooked. They want it and it goes resale because it's worth that. And I don't know what they cut out of it, flooring or whatever, but yeah, someone buys it. So
walnut, white oak, hard maple, that's where the current market conditions, that's probably the hot 3 right now.
Yeah. And believe it or not, we have some decent markets for some other undesirable stuff typically, but it just depends on what it, what it is and the quality of it. So
like this hickory here, where will that log, what will that go to?
That's a white oak.
Oh, that's a white oak.
Yes.
That looked like,
it's tricky because of the shaggy bark on it, but that is a white oak. And the reason I wanted to show that tree, somewhere around 4 or 5 years ago, something happened to this tree. So I don't know if something fell in the woods and scraped down this tree, peeling the bark back, and it caused a wound.
Yeah.
Or if it was hit by lightning. I think it was more or less hit by lightning, because that's what'll happen. You'll blast a piece of bark off.
Yeah, that whole side has kind of like a scrape in it or something.
And then you'll see soft maples that get something similar like that too, but if you cut the log on the end, you'll see a crack that goes straight to the center. And it's like if you were to saw it, the two halves would fall apart. That's called a frost crack. This isn't a frost crack. This is just a scar. This will still go to the grade mill, and it'll probably be laid out to see if someone wants to buy that for a stave log, because like I said, there's still 3 clean sides on that. Yeah. They can cut that defect out of it.
It's crazy how the bark is different on white oak.
Yes. So the white oak, here's an example you had in your last video. That was a soft texture white oak, highly sought after. Growth rings per inch is very, very tight. Slow growing tree. The texture of the wood is very desirable for people woodworking. Veneer buyers like it. Stave buyers like it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of that stuff around because that's very slow growing, and it's very, like, I want to call it like, used to call it old growth, but it's just.
Yeah, that last one I did was around 190 years old, give or take, something like that. And consistent growth rings.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Some small variations, but pretty consistent.
And typically when I cut that, if I cut the cross cut of the log and I'll look at the end, I can tell by looking at the bark, but it's way more, it's tighter and chunkier. And then I'll call this just typical white oak. You'll have more of a scaly, like that. Now up in the crown, the soft texture will get that real scaly bark, but the trunk seems to be tighter. But I always like the soft texture. It's nice to cut. It'll have a nice, it almost looks pink when you saw the end of the log.
Yeah, really pink.
And you'll find, like, for you, the band mill probably glides right through that, whereas this stuff, you'd notice a little more resistance.
Right. Now this red oak here, that's a good example of some of the like mineral streaks and things in this one.
Yes, everybody thinks that what makes the log grade is how many knots and how straight it is. Sometimes you can have the straightest log, it happens actually a lot more than you'd think, the straightest log with no limbs. So this here, the other side is clean. This is a 10-footer, I do believe, and it's all 4 sides are clean. It's very little sweep to it. Unfortunately, what would downgrade this log is mineral, and then there's other things, I'll call them shadows, like you'll see here, some kind of ingrown defect, and I find that a lot on red oak in strip mine areas. So like when it's growing on strip spoils and stuff.
Yeah.
These trees were growing on ground that was bald in the 1950s and 60s, so.
Yeah.
And it's fast growing, it's great material, but unfortunately you get those and it kind of messes with you.
So this white oak, that's about all you're going to get in about 70 years, huh? On a white oak.
Yeah.
About 70 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So that log, I'm going to say, if that doesn't, they might send it for stave, they might not. I don't know. It just depends on how hot it is right now. I'm not in the mill very often to tell you. Market conditions change daily, weekly. You know, something's hot on Monday, all of a sudden, we don't want nothing for it on Friday. You know, it's very...
That makes it very difficult to buy timber from landowners.
Oh, speculation is incredible. So, on that note, a lot of people will say, you did the video of what that log was worth. To the landowner, that log was not worth that much, because you have to figure, one, there's the operating cost of me having to harvest the tree. You have the trucking costs. You have local permit costs and things like that, which some places aren't bad at all. Other places are ridiculous. You have all that is factored into the sale of the timber itself. So where that log paid, I forget what you said, it was $1.
Like $1.25 a foot.
Yeah, to the landowner probably paid about 80 cents.
Yeah, which
You know
is
what I mean?
actually pretty good because you got to cut it down. You got to
Yeah.
get it out of the woods, get it to a landing area.
Yeah, there's so many people that walk in the woods and go, they pay this much for that, and that's what I should be getting for it, and it's frustrating. And then also you have very skewed markets. You go to these local woodworking stores. I'm not going to name names because I don't know if it's copyrighted or not, but we have a couple around here that are big that'll sell lumber. They'll buy 2 common cherry, which 2 common's a garbage grade. They'll buy it and sell it in their store for like $1 a foot. And you know dang well that it's not $2 a foot. I mean, that was crating material, you know.
Yeah.
And they're buying it cheap and reselling it, where small woodworkers can use that. So people get that idea, oh, they're getting that for it in the store, this is what I should get. And then furthermore, the cost in the lumber is drying and handling, because when lumber is sawn, it is graded, you know, at green scaled grade.
Yeah.
Sent off to a kilned, then it is regraded, because the drying process will create checks, cracks, twists, bows, crowns, you know, anything like that could kick a board out of a grade. So you got to figure, they have to handle that board twice to grade it. They have to handle it to dry it. Then it gets planed usually before it goes to some of them stores, or you can buy it rough and that takes off the price. But all things to think about.
Yeah, I don't know how many different, I mean, you think about it, from the landowner, permits, you cutting it, getting it out, trucking, sawing, stacking, stickering, drying, regrading again after that, and then goes to market.
And it's mind-numbing. And sometimes we have double trucking on these. So we don't have a whole hillside of stave, you know, white oak here. So you can't, it makes it hard to make a whole load of it to send it directly to the one place. And also, we'd like to have the buyer come and tell me what he wants. So, like, we'll take these logs, things that I think are veneer and things are stave. They'll go to a log yard. They will be laid out accordingly. So the white oak will go over here, and things we think are veneer and stuff will go over there. And maybe they're buying a certain type of red oak, that'll go over here. And then the buyers come. They go through, mark up what they want, give the owner of the log at that time, which would be the mill, a check for it. And then they'll come back and they'll haul exactly what they want out. So now you have 2 trucking costs on that log. So it can be daunting. We try to do anything you can. Like if I'll get a whole bunch of nice stuff and I have room like we have here, we can lay them out in the field and have a buyer come right here, which, you know, that saves that $5 a mile that it costs to haul this stuff. So,
yeah. How many different grades of logs, and starting at veneer, working your way back?
Okay, so rule of thumb is usually, a lot of the mills around here, it's all scaled in Doyle scale, and you start with your veneer, and then you have your prime, then your select, then you have number 1, which is a 3-sided, no, number 1 is a 4-sided clear log, then there's 2 is a 3-sided clear log, and a 3 is a 2-sided clear log. I think I did that right.
Yeah, you got 2-sided moving up, 2-sided clear, 3-sided clear.
Yeah.
Then prime.
No, it'd be select.
Select.
Or number 1 or select. And that is usually determined by diameter. So if you have a 4-sided clear log that is 12 to 14 inches in diameter on the small end, that would be a number 1. If it is 16 inches in diameter and up, or whatever that mill does, you know, whatever their spec sheet is, sometimes it's 18 inches and up, then it'll bump it up to a select, because I think it's how much material they can get out of the log, you know what I mean? And then you will have your prime, which is something that's usually like a veneer reject, like, I got kicked out of veneer because...
Can a prime be a second log, or does it always have to be a butt log?
It can be a second log. And in veneer buyers, the rule that veneer buyers will only buy a butt log is not necessarily true. So you'll see if I get a nice trunk or a nice tree, I'll double cut it for 2 reasons. 1, it keeps the log from drying out faster. That instead of 4 ends that can check and crack, it's only 2 because you each end. So say instead of cutting 2 10-foot logs, I'll cut a 21 out of it, or sometimes a 22. I like to leave extra, especially on veneer logs too. If it's a 12-footer, cut at 12, 8, 13 feet. 10-footer, cut at 11 feet. 8-footer, cut at 9 feet. And there are markets for 9-foot material too, but because a lot of the buyers will come out and like, I want you to take a cookie off the end of that. And I want to look at it. And they'll come and they'll spray it with their wand and look for mineral and things, spray it with water. It's always good to have a little extra.
Yeah.
You can't put it back on once you cut it off. But
So your system here, you got this huge site. You skid everything up to here. So you got a dozer here and a skidder here.
yes.
And then you bring your logs up to this landing area, but your landing area moves as the job moves.
Yeah, so like we're cutting this patch of timber to my left over here, and we're also going to cut across the street. I will move this equipment across the street, probably right across. I think it's either right up there or right here. I'm going to plug another landing in to do that section over there. The idea is to keep your skids as short as possible. One, it saves me on fuel and wear and tear. Two, it saves on the impacted amount of ground. You know, if I can move that loader over there and say, I could skid all the way around the hill to bring it to here. One, it's going to cost a lot. Two, it's going to take a lot of time. And three, that's that much more road of impacted, you know, if you're into the soil compaction stuff and all that stuff, whatever. The less smaller areas I can keep it, the better.
So you bring pretty much full tree length up here.
Yes.
Cut the length with the buck saw, stack them up. You know what lengths you need.
Yeah, and I kind of go through, depending on species. Like I said, that all depends on what we make out of it. So, but this goes out to 12 feet, and I have a mark on that tongue over there for 14. And then I got a mark on the ground for 17-foot stock, which is either can be cut in half or it can be cut into 16-footers. And then there's 21s and 25s. We don't typically send anything longer than 25.
Now your loader, say you got a 24-inch white oak, super heavy, 50 feet long, probably tapers down to, what, 14 inches or something at the other end. Will that lift it?
Yep.
No problem.
Yes. But, yeah, so like you see, just as the last example, this log here, this is going to be considered a blocking log. Now, that will go to the grade mill. One, the grade mill does cut some blocking here and there. But two, there's two reasons. This log is, you know, hard maple, as far as I know, as of a couple days ago, is still doing decent. So if a good sawyer looks at that log, he's got a limb here. There's some kind of inclusion here. I'm not sure what it is. There's a little knot down there which will cut out. And then there's something right here. He might be able to roll and modify that log on the mill to where he could pull a couple pieces of face lumber off this log here and a couple pieces there that are, you know, they're going to be a 1 common or better, maybe even an FAS board here and there out of that. That will pay for the log. Then that point after that, you know, whatever blocking or, you know, industrial grade materials out, it's just pure profit. So it's all things you got to think about. Whereas like the cherry, if it's not a resale log for like an export log or something, it's basically, it'll go to the grade mill, but they're probably going to cut it into a blocking material, railroad ties, things like that, because it's just not worth anything. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, cherry cabinets and cherry lumber, it's worth so much. And it is only if you have the market for it, if there's a demand for it. So there's just no demand for it. It's not what's in right now. What's in is the lighter color woods. Obviously the white oak, because bourbon's a big thing. That draws a lot of the material off the market. And then red oak is driven by our foreign markets big time. So when we had the stuff with the tariff stuff in the China, they quit taking logs for a while. It really messed up the market for us big time. And I mean overnight it did it. Yeah. Huge orders canceled, things like that. So
boy, these, I thought my 404 chain on the processor threw some chips. This stuff here, 3/4 inch chain on that saw.
Yeah, it almost looks like chipper chips.
It does.
So,
well, let's look at everyone's always asking how to identify logs, and it can be tough to explain.
Yeah, it is, because there's some stuff that you'll look at and you'll think it's one thing.
I was mixed up on that. It looks like a shagbark hickory.
And it happens to me also. We'll come around this. I want to show this one log. So some people ask, like, that's blocking. Why would you send it to a grade mill? I explained that one. Here's another one too. This is another log. I think there is a knot on the other side of it. This red oak up here, not these ones. These are white pine. Those go for something different. But that log there. Now, I was like faced with a decision on this. This was, I think it was, I don't know, but it wasn't enough to cut this out of it. So I cut, I think, a 10 off the first one, and there was obviously some sweep in that log. So I cut it at the sweep, and then I couldn't short it. So I could have either cut a 12, would have had more sweep, and I'd have wasted this much of this log, or I could send this to the mill like this. So I cut a 10 and an 8, and this automatically makes you a blocking log. They call that double-hearted.
Yeah.
That's where the tree starts to Y.
Yep.
The reason I'll still do that is because, once again, a decent sawyer, this face here makes clean lumber and this face here makes clean lumber. This face, not so much. You might get one board out of it, but it would be high in stress. A big tell-all is where the included bark is when it grows.
Yep.
So I look at that. He can cut, once again, 2F, clear face lumber boards off of that, and then make blocking out of the rest. Other than that, I'd have to waste 3-4 feet of this log, and it sits over in the chunk pile, and it doesn't seem right to me, at least. And they saw it up at the mill and seen.
So ballpark, that's 70 board foot log.
I'd be lying if I told you, Mike. It's been a while.
Probably.
I had to stick in the truck.
What's something that grade paying nowadays?
That would just be blocking. I think you're probably like, blocking's like, hardwood blocking's probably around 50 cents a foot or something at the mill.
Yeah.
So paying to the landowner, that's only like 20, 25 cents a foot.
Yep. That, tell you what, where that splits, that's a good look at that right there. That's why when these trees get bigger and bigger, eventually
it's gonna break.
Thing's gonna break.
And that, as you travel up this, it's cut off already. This will get wider and wider and wider until eventually you see it. You can see it here a little bit.
Yeah.
But what happens is that's pointed up like this, and all that rainwater and everything sits in there and snow, and then you get frost, and it freezes, and it'll just a little bit of pry and a little bit of pry. And then over time, you get a good wind, and it'll just peel right open.
Yep. You can even see in that. Look at the water coming out of that. That's down a ways. You know what I mean? There's a lot. Yeah. Huh. All right. What are we looking at here, Pete?
So these would be called scrag poles.
Scrag poles.
Yeah, and they call them scrag poles because typically they'll go to a mill that has they call it a scrag mill. They'll cut this stuff down to certain lengths, anywhere from 4 to 8 feet, sometimes longer. But a scrag mill is basically, they'll grab the log on each end and run it through dual saw blades, and it rotates it, and it's just industrial lumber stuff. It's not so much for your grade lumber. But like these, right here, these are 25-foot stock. To look at, it's not perfectly straight. We cut them 25 foot. One, that's all the longer I can fit them on the truck. Two, we can cut either 3 8-footers out of that. We can cut 4
6s or whatever.
Yeah, there's multiple 3 8s, 2 12s, a 10 and a 14. It gives the guys options of what they want to make. Hey, this is what we need. We can cut this to what we need. So there's like this one here, I think it's a 21, and then there's some other oddball sizes, but we'll do 17 to 25, pretty much any length.
Okay.
If it's straight enough. But like that's smooth bark hickory or pig nut hickory. This one down here. We got cherry that has a little bit of red rot right there, but it's still got some usable on the outside there. More pig nut. Right here is a hard maple. Here's a good example of defect also in your maples. It's more prevalent in soft maple, but they call that worm.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it ambrosia, and there's different terms. Ambrosia, I think, is when the log actually starts to stain and rot, but either way, it makes beautiful lumber. I got a better soft maple I'll show you up there. It has lots of it. But the second it has worm in it, it's considered a defect and it goes to the blocking pile. Even if it's beautiful straight log. But this here would be thermal fuel or firewood.
Thermal fuel or firewood? Yep.
Thermal fuel.
I like that. Thermal fuel.
Trying to sound smarter than we are. Or I am, at least. But these are all, there's more pig nut hickory. Gorgeous log, beautiful grade. There's just no demand for grade hickory lumber around us, which is odd because you see tons of flooring and kitchen cabinets made out of it, but yet that it's not shown up on our end. And the only thing I can think of is that is such a narrow market that they have plenty of what they need, so they're not coming to other sawmills being like, hey, we want we'll pay
hickory.
for this. Yeah.
So that's pig nut. There's a lot of variations in hickory, but
the two
general.
Yeah, there's shag bark and pig nuts. We call it smooth bark and shag bark.
Okay. Which that is smooth bark.
I like working with smooth bark a lot more.
This splits better and stuff for firewood than the...
And it's a little nicer on the saw, I think, both on the head saw and also on the chainsaw or the cutter. I imagine it is too in the wood shop.
Yeah.
Whereas shag bark's like cutting rocks.
Hickory, Little red oak right here.
Little red oak here. This is more hickory. Here's a defect found a lot in hickory. They call that bird peck. And that'll show up on the outside of the log too. It'll look like a bunch of little holes all the way around. I guess that's where the birds peck at it. I don't know why they do that. I couldn't tell you, but.
Boy, there it is too again.
Yep, see it? They hit it. Makes pretty lumber when you saw it. You got a pretty rough cherry here.
But still, even like this, a guy with like a little mill, if you take your time, you can get some nice lumber out of this log right here. You know what I mean?
And that's all.
You're not going to fly through it or anything like that, but
no. Well, like you said, for example, you're buying the land clearing logs where you get the rough with the good. If you take your time and you know what to pick through, you can get stuff to make it worth your while.
Yeah.
You know, and this here is gray elm. Now it doesn't look. This is not the true color here. This is because it's staining because of the heat and the sun. It's bleeding water and it stains. I don't have a fresh one cut laying around here, but the one big one up top's gray elm. This is a white oak here that's just too bumpy for anything. I'm trying to find you.
What causes red rot in cherry? Do you know?
I don't know. It's just a PA thing.
Until you get up, you can find, correct me if I'm wrong, but cherry, you can find really good pockets of it anywhere in PA. Yeah. But generally speaking, you get up northwest PA is where the good stuff is.
Yeah, bestest.
I like
cherry.
that word, bestest cherry.
Bestest. The best cherry I found, and I think it's noted as in the world, is in the Allegheny National Forest area, area. So you're looking at like Forest, Potter, Warren counties, up in that area, Venango County. It just grows.
It grows like telephone poles.
Gun barrels, straight, no gum. Just, it is gorgeous.
I read once, I don't know if it's true or not, a lot of that has to do, well, you were talking earlier about the soil.
Soil conditions, water.
Up there you've got what they call the Allegheny Plateau. So it's a combination of like the elevation.
Yep.
Right underneath the subsoil, they have a seam of sand rock up there.
Yes.
It's just something to do with
a little bit of everything.
The soil and everything. It's very, very good for cherry.
So, like I said, this was all hard maple, hickory, and the elm, a little bit of red oak. I'll come over here.
This cherry has some nice color to it, even though...
Like man, there was some gorgeous stuff I sent out of here. And like I said, unfortunately, it'll probably be... They'll saw some grade. They have a little bit of a market for some FAS grade lumber, but for the most part, it'll go for blocking materials. This here is one of my true favorites. And it is kind of an underrated wood in my opinion. It is called red elm. Now it looks the same as the gray elm, but it is not. There's a really small sap ring. The wood, when you saw it, is actually red like a red oak inside, but it almost has like, I call it the driver's license effect. When you look at it different angles, you get different colors.
Yeah.
But one problem with red elm, when you saw it, it goes all over the place. It's like gum bands when you try to dry it. And the stress is in the log. Typically has wind shake in it. I don't know what wind causes it, but I don't know what causes it.
That's wind shake, these cracks. And I've seen logs where you'll have series of these.
Yes.
You know, as the tree's growing, I don't know if it's a bad storm or what it is, but there's separation.
And then when you dry it, it just goes everywhere from what I'm told. I want some of that I want to make flooring someday. So, like we talked about veneer, this is a red oak. And this is just, I'm going to use this as an example, but you can see what they look for is center heart. But say this was a tree that was a centered heart and perfect, but if your growth rings are all here, look to be about 1/8 of an inch, and all of a sudden they go to a quarter. And they get a
up
little
here
bit
it's like a half.
Yeah, that is, the veneer buyers don't want that. They want an even growth ring. They want that pattern all the way throughout the log.
Red oak is a remarkable wood though for how fast it grows, yet how dense and heavy it is. I don't know of any, that we have.
I think it's one of the most popular woods in the world. It seems like it's never one of them things it's like, oh, red oak is really, really hot. It's either like, it's kind of just hovers at its point.
It's just like, okay.
Yeah, like everyone uses it all the time, but not everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's always trim, there's always doors, there's always cabinets, there's always flooring, but it's not the only thing that people want,
Yeah.
It's just...
Nice big cherry down here.
Yes, there's a couple. Some of them are a little bent up, as you can tell. They were chubby trees, but short. Right here's that soft maple. And you see the worm in it all the way around?
Yep.
I cut some that look like a sun inside.
Yeah.
And it's just, here's worm in the hard maple. You don't see as much worm in the hard maple, and I don't know why.
Like you said before, the hard maple, looking at it, it just looks harder.
It is too. It is.
That's why they make baseball bats out of it.
Yeah. There was a tricky one that would get right here. So most people would look at this and go, hey, that's a poplar. Actually, it's not. That's what they call cucumber.
Uh-huh.
Now, in the woods, I don't know how we bid. I've bid some jobs where we'll just bid that as poplar. But I know it has more defect than poplar normally does. Like it more limbs and things like that. But once it's on the ground and runs through the mill, the lumber itself is sold as poplar. It's just like,
really?
It's like a twin.
I think they call that a cucumber magnolia. I think is what they call it.
Yeah, wonderful lumber, very stable. A little bit harder than poplar, I think, but not noticeable really. You got to really be.
These are some pretty consistent rings on this one.
Yes. You see here, it started going crazy at that point.
Yeah.
Something happened. So, well, right about here. So I'm guessing that's probably about the last time that section was logged. I wish I had. I've done videos on it where you could tell clearly where the woods was opened up.
Yeah, boy, especially with pines. I've seen where they came in and finally thin pines. People planted red pine, white pine with the intentions of you come in and thin, and then they never did a thing with it again. You know what I mean? But when you see where they come back and actually thin, those growth rings will just explode.
Yeah. They get that sun and crown light. I don't think there's too many other goofy species in here right now.
Big old cherry on this end here.
Yeah.
There's a good, yeah.
Here's a red oak that's on the outside looks really good, but you get inside, there's a little bit of wind shake in the center. That's okay, because that's in the center. We'll cut that out. Like that's where all your stress is in most of the trees, but this is all mineral.
Yeah. Like
shadows and stains. That log would probably go for blocking because that mineral makes some minerals accepted and some is just not.
I always kind of like the gum streaks in cherry. I think it looks cool.
Here's one with a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Now, I was told once, now I don't know how much truth is this still anymore because the cherry market's so messed up, but gum will kick a four-sided clear log out of veneer potential, but it won't affect lumber.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's still true or not.
So would you say there's about 750,000 feet on this job approximately?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's big.
You'll be here a while.
Yeah. It's a little overwhelming.
Yeah. All right, I'm just leaving Pete's job. I wanted to pull over here for a minute. We lost a little bit of audio at the end, but I think we got most of it. Pete is a wealth of information. I have been trying to learn more about everything when it comes to sawing lumber and trees and drying and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot to it. There really is. And I just want to learn more about it and get better at it. You know, I can make nice lumber. It looks good, but I realized I have so much more to learn. And you guys mentioned a channel to me the other day, and I've been watching it quite a bit. Hobby Alabama Hardwood, I think it's called, but it's Robert Milton. And he really gets into the details when it comes to sawing lumber. He's got a Woodmizer LT70, but I've been learning a lot from this guy. He knows what he's doing. He does. And there's a lot to it. And it kind of reminds me of my blasting days. You know, it took a long time. I was in that business for 25 years, and it probably took me 10 years to get real good and real comfortable no matter what the job was where I showed up. And it's kind of like the lumber and sawing. Everything's different. Each log's different. Like Pete was saying, depending on where you're at, different areas where trees are growing, they're all different, and it takes a long time to learn, you know, as much as you can, everything that you need to know. But this Robert Milton guy, he did a test, I think it was one of his older videos, on sawing slow to real fast. I think he did 4 or 5 different tests and how the gullet clears out the sawdust and ripple in the boards. And I think that's one of my problems. I'm sawing too slow. But you reach a point of diminishing return as well if you saw too fast. It's just finding the sweet spot. And the more information you can get, the better you will be at what you do, no matter what business you're in or what hobby you're in. It's just all about learning as much as you can. But I highly recommend that Robert's channel, Robert Milton, and also Pete's channel, Nuts 319. And good stuff though. I'm learning a lot, and I'm trying to share that through the videos as well. That Milton's channel, he really gets into the nuts and bolts, you know what I mean? So if you just want to see someone sawing a log real quick, wouldn't be the channel for you. But if you want to learn, he's a great teacher and explains everything very well. But I'm sitting out here by the highway right now, and on the way in I realized this. I've got a good story for you. This video is going to run kind of long, but this is a good story. There's a bar right here called the Mousetrap, okay? And I remembered where I was at. There's a highway over here. Well, years ago, I was blasting on that project right there. And I remember this bar. I never went into it, but I remember the Mousetrap being there. So I know where I'm at. When you do those road jobs, you know, I'm in there during the mass excavation of it and blasting, and then you move on to somewhere else when it's getting finished. And it always looks different, especially years later. But I was definitely right over in here. But there's a section of this highway just down the road, and the company that was doing it, they went bankrupt in the middle of the job. And that's a big deal on a state and federally funded project. And you know, they're bonded, so someone ate a bunch of money. But this job, they had 3 777 rock trucks, big rock trucks, 100-tonners, and they're almost brand new. Well, the story goes, and I can't confirm all this, but I can confirm most of it. They had these trucks financed, and when they went bankrupt, they somehow sold these trucks and got them into Mexico from here in Pennsylvania. So they were financed. Back then, those trucks were probably $1 million a piece, and they owed a ton of money on them. But they sold the trucks, tore them apart, shipped them all the way to Mexico before anyone found out, and the owner of the company kind of disappeared to an island somewhere. That's the way the story goes. But that job, we ended up getting hired to finish it. And I mean, they had equipment sitting everywhere. Ended up most of it got sold or whatever, but that was a crazy story. To be able to steal, they basically stole 3 777 rock trucks, shipped them to Mexico. But anyway, I think that's about it for today's video. Don't forget, check out Pete's channel, Nuts 319. And if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of sawmilling, Robert Milton's channel, highly recommended. Catch you on the next one.